speaker is Landon Van Dyke from the U.S. State Department, Senior MA Executive Coordinator of Sustainability. He handles all the sustainability projects at the U.S. Department of State. Mr. Van Dyke. Last but not least.
I've been working on trying to keep my silver hair away as well. Thank you. Just want to say thank you to WGES for inviting me, along with University of DC for putting this together. Wow, you guys have a great. I've been looking at the guest list here and who's actually out here. It's quite a great symposium of both students and industry, which I was under the impression that I would only be talking to industry, but for the students, I actually came here for two reasons. One, I wanted to steal all of the industry ideas that I hear today, so I expect to hear lots of ideas from you guys. And then two, to recruit interns for the summer for the State Department. So please come talk to us, and we'll steal you away and get you a job somewhere, I'm sure. All right. That said, I actually do have a whole list of things to say here. Thrilled again to be here. It is actually an extremely exciting time to be in the green energy industry. I was reading somewhere. There was about 560 gigawatts of electricity from renewable energy worldwide now. And if you think about what it takes to actually make that happen, it's extraordinary. If you go back to '85 and you ask Dr. Brown if he could use 1.21 gigawatts of electricity to get his car to go back and forth in time, it's extraordinary he could actually do it with clean energy now, rather than using a fusion-based system. Anyway, I thought that was actually funnier in my head. I wrote that out. But seriously, on the solar side, it's amazing. Since 2010 to today, I also understand that solar capacity has increased more than 4 decades, for the past 4 decades. So it's extraordinary. As you guys have already heard, GSA, Army, and Commerce. You've heard that the U.S. government has not been sitting idle over the last decade or so, or the last couple of decades. Obviously, the President has unveiled his climate change plan, and it is, setting out what our energy intensity goals are, what our greenhouse gas goals are, and the State Department, of course, like all the other agencies, follows suit, follows command, and we jump right into it. On our part, we're basically working to engage the diplomatic community around the world. And before I jump into this even further, for all the students out there, think of ways that you can actually innovate on what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to tell you what we do, and I expect that you guys will come up with better ways for me to do it. And for industry, I want you to think of ways to take advantage of the platform we've established to promote your goods. All right, so I'll put that out there before I dive in. So our job basically in our office is to engage the diplomatic community, both U.S. embassies around the world and foreign embassies around the world, to basically try to get them to be more sustainable, more green, improve their operations. I'm sure many of you have already seen in your industry that there are certain greening standards that's showing up in relative industries. You get the Green Build certification now, you have ISO certifications and standards, you have biodegradable standards. It's showing up everywhere. We would like to actually see one for diplomacy, a sustainability standard for all embassies around the world. You can look at an embassy and go, these people are doing X, Y, and Z to basically reduce their footprint and be a good guest in the host country where they reside. Okay. My team and I have been working both on the global side, on efficiency and sustainability, and we're basically working to facilitate technologies from our country in the host country, and basically facilitate matching up local communities' goals with our activities. So in Washington, for instance, we have the DC Greening Embassy Forum. We bring all the foreign embassies together. They exchange best practice on what they're doing to reduce their footprint. And then we have them try to meet the DC government's goals on sustainability as well. So we heard earlier today about reporting energy into the DC government. That's not required by a diplomatic mission within the US, but they do it voluntarily because they want to help meet and be a good member of the community. So they provide that information to the DC government so the DC government can do better planning for its infrastructure. These are the type of things that we do. We try to engage that community. Understand that the diplomatic community, no matter which capital you're in, is a very high-profile community. Everybody wants to know what's going on in those embassies. You got the big walls, you got awesome architecture. Many of them have galas that happen on the weekends, and sometimes they give you wine tasting. Go France. You know, so everybody's interested in these buildings and what's going on, which means they are wonderful stages for all of your equipment, for all of your services. And for us overseas, everybody wants to know what's happening in an American embassy. Everybody wants to know, well, the Americans came in and they said they believe in environmentalism. What's their embassy doing? And so that becomes the stage. People come in, thousands of people through the embassies get visas every year. They are waiting in line. What could they be looking at? They could be looking at the system on the wall, talking about what are we measuring? What are we trying to reduce? What are our goals on the actual energy compound, or the energy consumption for the compound? They could be reading information about even our water, our low-flow toilets. I mean, you have to use them, you have to see it. It's a sign that the United States actually cares, but it also shows what technologies and what services we can provide in that country. So just kind of put that in your mind that diplomatic community is a high-profile area. Our footprint for the State Department, just to give you guys an idea of, we're not as big as the Army. Sorry. We do spend about $500 million on electricity. Don't quote me on that. I'm looking at the camera. But around $500 million on utilities. So obviously we have a footprint on energy as well, and we try to do cost containment. We have about 75,000 employees spread out in about 285 posts in about 190 countries. And we have 90,000 computers. I don't know how we have 90,000 computers with 75,000 employees, but we do. We have about 14,000 vehicles. So everything that you would want to take care of, fleet, IT, procurement, green energy, those are things that we need service for our embassies around the world. And you have to understand, we're comparable to a multinational organization, or Coca-Cola, 90,000 employees, about 195 countries. We're in about 190 countries, 75,000. Hilton has 4,200 properties around the world. And they're only in 90 countries. We're obviously in a little bit more, 20,000 properties. So for us, we have to be able to manage those properties well, efficiently, smartly, and that's relying on industry to help us figure those things out. GSA does a great job, but we also need some innovative stuff from industry, and I'll get into that in a moment. We obviously, in the State Department, around the world, we do different tools like behavior changes to better logistics, management, obviously smart procurement, green procurement, making sure styrofoam doesn't get into the embassy so it doesn't end up in the landfills later on. We're trying to make sure that the host country understands we're not trying to suck out all of the energy on their grid, especially if it's in a country that has very little energy in the first place. We don't want to be the one building that's glowing in the middle of the night and everybody else is kind of pitch dark or has a coal-based burner in the backyard. We want to be seen as partners overseas. So we do LEED certified buildings overseas. We have about 30 of those overseas. We have the world's first LEED Platinum embassy over in Helsinki. Domestically, we have about 7 LEED buildings in the United States, of course strategically placed in specific senators and congressmen's districts around the country. I won't say which ones, but you can probably guess. And you know, we even have a net zero building in Charleston, South Carolina. So we are trying to walk the walk with our design and execution. But again, overseas, in many places where we have LEED buildings, we're the first building that is LEED certified in that country. And so that means something. It gives an opportunity for USGBC to step in and talk about what their standards are. Obviously, it allows the Germans and the Brits and some other countries to come in and talk about their building standards. And the more the merrier. You know, we're trying to be inclusive on that. In our embassy in Jamaica, we've realized hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings by deploying smart meters at those places. You have to understand, when you work overseas, sometimes you get utility bills twice a year, right? So in places like Africa, they might come to you and say, you know, we think you use this much electricity this year, but we could really use this much money. So here's your bill. And for us, we say, okay, you know, that's the way it works here. However, it doesn't help us on our performance, and it doesn't help us reduce our energy consumption off of their grid. And so we need to be able to deploy our own meters to understand what our buildings are doing. In Jamaica, we did that. Domestically, we started this program out. We found out that the building we own across the street had an $8 thermometer broken on the roof. Why that's important is because we were looking at this daily energy consumption of that meter, and we were noticing huge spikes. And we're like, well, what is this about? Found out the thermometer on the roof, which was broken, basically tells the intake system for the HVAC unit to turn on or use indoor air or outdoor air. Because of that, it was turning on and off every 15 minutes because it didn't know what to do. We saved $250,000 annually by fixing an $8 thermometer because we had a smart meter telling us what our building performance was. And we want to do that at all of our embassies around the world. But we have to do it in a secure way. This is also why I'm looking at industry here, figure out how we do this securely. But I'll get back to that in a moment. So on the renewable energy side, obviously Vice President Biden's Caribbean Energy Security Initiative is focused on getting clean energy into the Caribbean. We're focused on making sure that our embassies in the Caribbean have clean energy on display, but also give industry the opportunity not only to service us, but to get familiar with the markets, to get familiar with how the utility companies in those countries work, so that they can actually deploy their goods and services in those countries. So beyond working and serving us as an entity or a customer, you then have your foot in the door to basically work with the host country and their market. So that's what we're trying to do by making sure we are a green energy an organization. I'm going to skip that because we're running out of time. Eco-diplomacy, it's our vision that green embassies should serve as sustainability labs and incubators for cities. In DC, obviously I mentioned that we were able to get 77 embassies to sign and make a commitment to the mayor. They're going to be re-signing that commitment later on this year, hopefully, with a new mayor. Basically focusing on this city's sustainability challenges, which is stormwater. You know, in some cities it's about grids. In this city it's about stormwater runoff, where when it rains too much, all the water hits the cement, doesn't go anywhere, it goes into the sewage system. Raw sewage ends up in the rivers, ruins the rivers, goes down and destroys the oysters into the Chesapeake Bay. I love oysters, so I'm very passionate about this for selfish reasons. In 2012, the State Department did a survey of its employees around the world and said, hey, are we doing eco-diplomacy? Are we engaging the host country on green activities about what we're doing as an embassy and what they can possibly take advantage of in that country from our technologies? And 33% came back and said, yes, we're doing it. And we're like, okay, that's not good. Last year, we asked the same question. 77% of the embassies are now doing it. So we are definitely turning that around, trying to make sure that we are a platform for industry and the NGO community to basically communicate their message. One of the things that we just recently signed with EPA, and many of you probably have heard about the air quality monitoring system on the embassy in Beijing, which monitors the air quality in China, both in Beijing and all the consulates around the country. We're going to be doing that in other places around the world, in places where the World Health Organization doesn't have data, and it's not reliable, and they don't have a system in country. So what we're going to do is put it on our embassies and then create a partnership with host countries to basically help them establish their own air quality system, but let our embassy represent one of those data points. The reason that's important is because it demonstrates how we can use our own technology and things for ourselves while overseas and help build partnerships with our host countries. Moving on, I know you guys probably want to ask lots of questions over there, so I'll kind of skip over that. And this was a good joke here, but I'll miss that one. On the local action, I think we've already talked about the DC Forum. So